Hello and welcome back to the Ad Race podcast. I'm your host, Fayola Douglas, and I'm joined by Sachini Imbuldeniya. Sachini is co-founder and CEO of House of Oddities, an independent, award-winning creative agency founded on the principle that difference makes a difference. As one of the 0.01% of women of colour that own a creative agency, Sachini is on a mission to make the industry more equitable for women, people of colour, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ+ community, and people from working class backgrounds. Welcome. I almost got that wrong about the not. I think it was 0.1%. It's 0.01.
The extra zero is quite key there.
Yeah. It means it's an incredible achievement, and also it's a shocking figure.
Yeah, I think it's 0.1 for women and 0.01 for women of colour, which is kind of wild.
Yeah. We'll get onto that definitely later. So we're going to start off talking about your educational background. So I know you studied graphic design at university. Did you know back then what you wanted to go on to do, or did you have an inkling about like the different careers available?
Okay, so how much time do we have? Because I feel like there's no short way of explaining it. Fine. Okay, there's no short way of explaining it, but I'll try to get to the point as quickly as I can. I've just got to give you a bit of context first.
Yeah.
So, as someone that comes from a South Asian background, I was forced to study science, but my passion has always been art. And I know like that's a narrative that we do hear time and time again with South Asian people who are kind of forced into different careers. But in my mum's defence, like I get where she was coming from. I grew up on a very rough council estate in London, and by the time I was 10, my mum was a single parent with 3 kids, and she was a nurse, and we didn't have a lot of money. So ultimately, she wanted the best for us. So in her mind, I think, she thought if you became a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you were pretty much guaranteed an income. And when I told her I wanted to study art, she was sort of like, she actually said, quote unquote, "What are you going to do, sit on the street and paint?" And even with that, I kind of felt like, she had a point, because back then, and even still to some extent today, like there's a real lack of knowledge in schools around the kind of wide breadth of career paths that you can take in creative industries. And I actually got onto a biology degree at UCL, but 2 weeks in, I knew that my heart wasn't in it. And I was really lucky because I had one of my A-level tutors knew the head of the Art Foundation course at my old college, and he managed to convince her to let me on despite me not having an A-level in art, and you needed to have them basically to go onto an Art Foundation course. So I do really owe that man a lot, and I have weirdly tried to find him, but I can't. But yeah, he sort of like changed my whole career path, I guess. And as the youngest of 3, I kind of felt like I could afford to be a little bit rebellious, because I had my oldest brother became an orthopedic surgeon, and he really wanted to be a filmmaker, but he was forced to study science, and he loves it now. But I kind of, as the youngest, I think I could afford to be a little bit more rebellious. So I did spend the next 12 months pretending to my mum that I was going to UCL when I was actually going to the Art Foundation course.
At least you were studying something. At least you were doing something. It could have been worse.
I was like, if I tell her, I'm just going to get disowned, because that's kind of like the South Asian family way. So I did. I pretended for 12 months that I was going to UCL when I was actually going to this Art Foundation course. And I only told my mum during the end of year show. And she was which I invited her to. And that's like the first time she'd kind of like seen stuff. And there was a lot of information for her to process, obviously. But I think, she was like understandably not impressed at all. But I think once my tutors spoke to her and explained that I could actually make a career out of this, she like definitely softened. But then, yes, going back to your original question, like I had to choose an art related degree. And my tutors at the time were recommending that I study something like surface design or fine art. And whilst those are both things that I really did love and enjoy and I kind of wanted to pursue, I decided to get advice from basically the only other South Asian person on my course. And there were about 80 of us on that course, and it was only me and one other South Asian guy. But I just knew that he'd get it. So I went to him and asked him what he thought I should do. And he basically said, like, if you want a safe bet to get a job in this field, study graphic design.
Okay.
So I didn't actually have a particular interest in it, but I felt like by this point, like I'd pushed my luck quite far, and I sort of felt like I really needed to prove now that I could actually make money in the creative industry. So rather than doing something like fine art, which I wasn't certain that I could get a job out of, I thought, I'd do something where I possibly could. So going back to your original question, no, at that point I had absolutely zero idea what I wanted to do. But I just knew that I had to now find a way to make this work.
So in those early days, did you ever feel that you were like entrepreneurial? Did you ever think that you could go on to be a founder and a CEO? Like, were those thoughts in your mind?
No, I definitely had absolutely no idea. I think in those early days, seeing a brown face in the spaces that I was working in, especially a brown working class face, felt pretty non-existent. And I mean, I'm not sure there's actually that much difference 20 years on, but at that time I just remember feeling incredibly grateful to even be there. And as a result, I felt like I spent a lot of those years like just really keeping my head down and trying to be as invisible as humanly possible in an attempt to not get fired, I guess. So
Yeah,
yeah.
almost trying to play it safe.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, just because I just felt like I was so lucky to, um, like on my degree, I studied at a London university, so it was quite mixed. But on my degree, I think there was, I can't remember, but roughly, let's just say about 80 people. I think only like three of us got jobs in the industry. So it was lots of my uni friends have like moved into different fields. Like one's a PE teacher and one's doing like accounting and stuff, And I think it's because it was just so hard to get a job in the
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
So knowing what you know now, like both about, I guess there's many routes that graphic design can take you, but there were other options that you had in terms of what you could study. Do you ever wish that you had gone another route in terms of your education, or like that you'd stayed doing biology for another 3 years?
It's like a weird sliding doors question, right? Like, 'cause
Yeah,
I feel like everything I ever did and every step I took, whether it was good or bad, has led me to where I am right now. So I
yeah,
feel like I'd never change anything. Like I feel like when people ask you like if you could change something from the past, what would it be? I don't think I ever would. Like even if it was a terrible thing that happened, because I think all of those things kind of build you into the person you are today. So I think it's really important to have those experiences. So I don't think I would have studied anything different, and I don't regret studying graphic design. I loved it after doing it. It just wasn't my intention before I did my degree.
has it given you a good base of knowledge that you still draw upon now?
Yeah, I do for sure. Like I've definitely learned a hell of a lot more whilst actually working in the industry, but I think my education gave me a good like solid foundation, and I don't think I would have been able to get a job in this industry without a degree at that time.
Yeah. So your first role was at the Sunday Times, if I'm correct, and then you also spent time at Associated Newspapers, John Lewis, and GQ. Like, how did you find those early days of your career?
So I love working in editorial, like I loved it, and sometimes I still really miss it. And like I think good journalism and freedom of expression is such a sacred thing, like especially at a time like now when 124 journalists have been killed and the general public are being arrested for trying to stop a genocide. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there are many ups and downs during my years in editorial, and navigating that world as a woman of colour from a working class background with a disability wasn't an easy feat by any means, but I did meet some of the best people that I know today. And I think editorial back in those days was very much like it was like a fast track boot camp for life. I felt like if you could survive working there, everywhere else would be like a walk in the park, and that's just so true.
How did you go about securing those like first roles? How did you get your foot in the door?
So I worked really bloody hard at uni, and I think a lot of that came from me obviously trying to prove myself to my mum that I could be successful, because I'd been a deviant and obviously gone off track. And I'm pretty sure I'm like the first person to study art in my wider kind of family of hundreds of cousins and stuff. And I think yeah, I just kept my head down. Like I didn't have the normal uni life. Like I did obviously party a bit, but I was very like in my books because I just was like I have to make this work now. I didn't have a fallback option, and I think because I come from a working class family and we didn't have tons of money, and obviously you're paying university fees and all those things. Like I was like I cannot fuck this up. Like I have to make it work. So I studied really hard. I got a first, which was amazing, and I think when I got my degree, I was genuinely exhausted, and all I wanted to do was take a year out and travel. And the senior designer that happened to be at the Sunday Times magazine at the time used to go to my uni. So she had reached out to my tutor that year and basically said, like, do you have any graduates that are kind of, looking for work? So my tutor rang me up and said, do you want to go for an interview at the Sunday Times magazine? And I was like, no, I just want to travel. I was I was 21, so I was like, why would I want to do that? I just want to travel, right? And she was like, I really think you should go. And I was just like, oh, I really want to travel. Anyway, she made me go. She convinced me to go to this interview.
Yeah.
I did. And then I met the art director. He looked at my folio and then he was like, amazing, start tomorrow. And I was like, oh my God, my travel dreams are shattered. But obviously, I was very grateful that I'd literally just graduated and I'd been given uni and got a job, which was incredible. So I couldn't say no, and obviously, I don't regret saying no either. But it was that weird time when InDesign was quite new. So at uni, we were using Quark Express. And he had said, like, can you use InDesign? And I was like, nope. So he was like, don't worry, I'll bike you over a manual. So I went home, and that same evening, this bike turned up with, like, this fat manual.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God. So I stayed up all night trying to learn InDesign in, like, a couple of hours, which is impossible. You can't, right? But I tried my best. And yeah, that was it. I remember, like, it was a really exciting but also very daunting experience for someone entering the working world for the first time. And then, to make it even worse, on my first day, I basically mooned the entire office. So my first day out of uni, Sunday Times magazine, I basically bent down and my jeans ripped straight down the arse seam. And for some reason, I was wearing a thong that day too. It really wasn't a good look.
Like, these years it could be its own, like, film. I can imagine, like, a little Netflix series.
My first, and they were all, I bought new jeans as well because I was first day at work. I've got to, like, wear something, impressive or whatever. They ripped down the seam, flashed the entire office, and to this day, like, I'm not sure who saw, but there was like a whole team behind me. But I panicked and I sat on the desk, and I remember I called over that senior designer that had gone to my uni, who I had only met for the first time now.
Yeah.
And I told her, and she first started pissing herself laughing, obviously. But then she said, like, you're really lucky that you work where we work. And I didn't know what she meant, but she tied her jacket around my waist, took me to the toilet, and then she ran to the style cupboard, because I didn't know they had a style cupboard either. Got me a pair of jeans, came back, bought me them, and was basically like, return them tomorrow. I was like, okay. But yeah. I mean, yeah.
You made a great first impression, memorable.
Well, yeah, so I was there for 6 years after, so I don't know if it was because of the mooning or because I was good at my job. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'll never find out.
Definitely. So aside from that kind of scare start to your time at where was that, the Sunday Times?
Yes.
What were some of the most pivotal learnings that you've really kind of held on to from those early days? I guess you said you were really learning on the job, you were straight into using InDesign for the first time. Yeah, what did you really learn on the job that you weren't able to pick up in a classroom?
Yeah, I think, a lot. Like, I think being in a newsroom in those days, and I'm sure it's a little bit similar sometimes still, maybe, but in those days especially, like, it was a really hardcore environment to be in. Like, the editor could come in the middle of the floor, with open plan floor, with, like, loads of people, rip up your work in front of your face, tell you it's shit, and then you just got to crack on and do it again. Like an hour before an entire issue would be going to press, that the editor might decide to chuck it out, and you've just got to stay all night and redo it, or whatever it takes, right? So you're in this really hardcore environment, and obviously there's lots of negative things about that, but the positive things that I've taken from it is that it has just made me, like, so resilient. It's made me really reactive and agile just working in that environment, and it's also made me really understand effective storytelling and how to get audiences' attention. And I think, working in editorial and newsrooms and all of those things, like, there's pros and cons, don't get me wrong, but I think the reason I am the way I am today is because of the experiences that I had, and being able to kind of build up a thick skin, I guess, and kind of just have this kind of slightly hardcore work ethic that has kind of made me get to where I am, I guess.
Nice. So do you have any advice for other people who are in a similar position to the position you were in back then? Maybe they're finishing university, they're interested in art direction, and particularly interested in roles at newspapers and looking in that direction. Do you have any advice for them? not necessarily about securing the role, but maybe like if they're starting out in that role, things to look out for, what they should be doing, like how to be successful within that.
Run. No. No, I'm joking. No, I would say that my advice is probably a bit more generalist, but I'd always say like do what you love. And I know like that sounds really cliche, but I think work never feels like work if you're doing something that you actually like and enjoy and love. So I'd always make sure that you're looking for roles that you do have a genuine interest in. And I'd also say don't rush to try and get a fancy job title for title's sake. So I meet a lot of young people these days that are kind of self-titled creative directors, and it took me 13 years of like serious hard graft before I was ready to be a CD, and it took me like 9 years before where to become an art director, right? And I think it's really important to understand every single aspect of your craft, whatever that craft may be, and to kind of start from the bottom and be a sponge and learn and absorb. And I think like, you know, just get as much as you can from senior experienced people in the room. And I think it's a weird one, but I obviously started in this industry at a time when we had to go into the office 5 days a week. And post COVID, obviously, that just isn't a thing anymore. And I'm obviously totally okay with that. But I do think because I have experience, like I can work from home and it's fine. But I think working from home as a creative that's kind of either just starting out in the industry or is less experienced, I think it's just really hard to learn when you're not all in one room kind of bouncing ideas of each other. You're like less likely to ask questions if people aren't in front of you. You'll miss those like golden nuggets of conversations where like new thoughts can kind of just be sparked when you're just making a tea in the communal kitchen or whatever. And again, like, I don't think I'd be in this position now if I hadn't been in 5 days a week and I didn't have access to all of these amazing, incredible senior creatives at the time that I could just learn off. So I do weirdly feel for the younger generation because it is such a hybrid working world. And whilst that has loads of perks and I'm loving that, I do think that from a learning position, especially in the creative world, it is tricky.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like sometimes you can have a conversation with somebody more senior and that can be useful, but actually the growth comes from hearing the two senior people talking about the other area that you're not actually working in yet. And so you learn and grow from those
Yeah.
interactions.
It can be conversations that you're not even meant to be a part of, but you just overhear
Yeah.
stuff and you learn stuff, and you know, it's just it's that weird thing. Like obviously, I feel like I don't know what the shift is, but I think there needs to be a better balance because I think I was genuinely in 5 days a week, every week for like 15 years, and obviously all of that just helped fast track stuff. Whereas I think if I was doing hybrid from the beginning, it probably would have taken me double the time, if that makes sense. Because I wouldn't be absorbing as much.
And so before I move on to talk about the next stage of your career, I do have to ask as well, did you ever get the chance to travel then?
No, I
Did you
didn't.
ever? Never.
Yeah, I actually didn't because I think I started working and it was such an intense journey
Yeah.
that I just never stopped and never stopped. Like obviously been away for like a
Yeah, been on holiday, left the country.
but I've never travelled. Yeah, so I think if I ever get to retire, then that will be the thing that I do.
So for a period of time, you were freelancing as an art director, which is how you started at Bridge Studio slash News UK. You decided to make a change and actually become permanent staff with them. Like, why did you decide to stay there?
So I only actually freelanced for 2 years, and that was because I'd been made redundant from a role previously, and I was struggling to find another full-time gig. So that's why I was freelancing for 2 years. But outside of that 2 year period, I've always been full-time, and I think that's always been a bit of a security thing. Like I think when you don't come from money, you need that comfort of a regular paycheck, and if you don't have a safety net or parents to support you, the world of freelance can be pretty scary. And although those 2 years were great, it was scary because you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get another booking or another, and it's really hard to like, keep up with your bills and everything. So as soon as I was offered, I started at British Studios freelance, but as soon as I was offered a full-time gig, I took it because, it was security, but it was also because it felt like the right place to be at that time in my career. It was my first ever experience of the commercial world. I'd always been in editorial before, and we were building something it was new, and we were building something quite special. We hired like one of the most incredible and talented teams that I've ever worked with, and we managed to create this like kind of bubble of a utopia within like a very corporate, old school kind of place. And it was a space where like it was a space full of weirdos and misfits and unexpected personalities, and I loved that because whenever we got into a lift with anyone from another department in the building, it was like really obvious that we didn't fit into the corporate world, and that everybody knew, oh, that's the British studio people. Do you know what I mean? And that was the beauty of it. I really liked that, and I think as long as we remained within the confines of that bubble, it was a really great place to be.
Yeah. Was that team already there when you started, or did it slowly start to build throughout the years?
No, so when I joined, there were maybe about 5 of us, and we built that team to 50. So I joined at the time when it was just being built and shaped. So yeah, it was great.
And how was that, I guess, the transition for you from working in editorial to then moving over and being in on the more commercial side of things? Like, did it happen quite seamlessly? Was there like a bit of a learning curve? Like, how was the change?
There was definitely a massive learning curve. And I mean, a lot of people don't believe me when I say it, but I am actually naturally introverted. So I feel like suddenly being in this, like, you know, client facing, salesy kind of like, obviously I'm still doing creative, but just obviously because it's commercial, I'm naturally introverted. And back then I was like way more introverted. I kind of forced myself and trained myself to be a bit more extroverted because I have to, because of my job. So I think it was a massive change for me. And I also think coming from editorial, like, back then, maybe still now, but back then they always frowned on the commercial team. It was always like these people that make this rubbish that goes inside all of our amazing stories. Do you know what I mean? And back then, like, the branded content world was pretty shit, and the stuff that was being made was pretty shit. And I think we came in to kind of change that, and you know, to show that, you know, like, this is the stuff that's paying for you guys to be here, and it doesn't have to be rubbish. You can actually make stuff for brands that is amazing and interesting and tell stories in a really kind of good way. And I think you know, I learned a lot because I came from a world where it was very print focused at the beginning, you know, and suddenly now I was in a space where we were doing like PR stunts and events and activations and films and digital and social and kind of everything in between. And obviously having bigger budgets to make brilliant work always helps, and you don't get that in editorial, right? So suddenly you've got more money to spend on like cool, making interesting things. So from a creative perspective, it was brilliant. Yeah, it was really good.
So it sounds like the work that you're doing was really quite varied. And I know that you were there for 7 years. Are there any projects that really stand out?
Yeah, there's loads. I'd say one would be the Sunday Times. Obviously, every year release their rich list, and it's obviously, you know, lots of people enjoy it. I'm a bit on the fence about celebrating lots of rich people, but anyway, it's a thing, right? And we had, our client was Skoda, and we proposed that we do like the alternative rich list, but we would put it in the Sunday Times in the same issue as the actual rich list, which was obviously a bit contentious. But we created an alternative rich list, which was to celebrate people that were rich from things that aren't money, so rich from life and doing good, amazing stuff. And it was just this really great thing. And it was amazing because it performed better than the actual rich list, which obviously the Sunday Times editor at the time wasn't impressed with. But it was just so amazing to see like the comments on Twitter, and the feedback at that time was just like, this is incredible, because, you know, people want to see people that are doing amazing things. We don't just want to celebrate the people that have loads of money. We want to celebrate the people that are, you know, making a difference. And we ended up doing that for quite a few years with Skoda because it was just so successful, and it was a really great campaign. And then I think my other one that I love was, it's another car one actually, but we worked with Kia, and I think this is because it's a bit more personal to me, but we worked with Kia, and it was kind of like about journeys that matter and taking people on journeys that are important, I guess, or that they haven't done in a long time. And when my mum first left, so I'm from Sri Lanka, and my mum came to the UK in the 60s, and she came after the UK had done a call out for the NHS because it was crumbling and they needed overseas, the irony, but they needed overseas workers to come and help prop it up. So my mum saw this call out and decided to come to England to train to be a nurse and help the NHS. And the first place, like she'd never left Sri Lanka, the first place she landed in the UK, her first experience out of Sri Lanka was Merthyr Tydfil in Wales, which is kind of random. Like if you've never left Sri Lanka, obviously Tydfil in Wales is quite strange, and that's because there was a teaching hospital there. So like that's the first place she went, and she trained to be a nurse in that hospital for maybe a year or so. Then she moved to London. She'd never been back there.
Yeah, you wouldn't, because it's like it would be
Yeah, there
yeah,
was
no need. Yeah,
no
nothing
need,
else there.
exactly. So then, as part of the Kia campaign, we needed case studies. So we had quite a few, but one of them was my mum, and we decided to drive her from London to this hospital because she hadn't been back in 50 years. So she was just really excited to kind of go on this journey and see the hospital, 50 years later. And, we interviewed her along the way and kind of, asked her about like, her experiences of the UK at that time and all of those things. And it was just amazing. Like she's 80 now. So for her to kind of, and when we got to the hospital, it was boarded up. It still exists, but they were about to knock it down and turn it into flats. And we kind of like just made it whilst it was still there, which was wild. But she remembered everything. She was like, this is the bus stop that we used to get into town and go out and all of these things. So that was really amazing. And weirdly, off the back of doing that, we did another project that was a personal project during COVID, but it ended up getting picked up by the UN. And it was off the back of my mum's story. And it was when we were all clapping for our carers, and everyone was celebrating all of the kind of people that were helped, from delivery drivers to, to carers, to nurses, to cleaners, to all of the people that were helping us. We were all clapping for them. And it was kind of this, we created this film based on my mum's story that was to say, like, we're clapping for them now, and that's amazing, but let's not, when COVID ends, let's not suddenly forget and go back to this like racist, divisive rhetoric. And that ended up being the United Nations official message of solidarity during COVID, and it got 308 million views worldwide, and that was organic as well. Like there was no paid spend or nothing behind it, but it kind of came off the back of doing that Kia campaign with my mum, and now it lives in like the People's History Museum in Manchester, and there's loads of countries around the world that kind of rang me to ask to make their own versions of them because it resonated so well. So yeah, I think that those two projects in particular.
That's like that's not only like just a great thing in your memories of the work that you've done. Like that's actually now like historic.
Yeah, totally. Like it's really weird. So I did that with my creative partner Darren, and it's really funny. Like recently, maybe like a year ago, his son came home from school, and it's on the curriculum. So he was like, "Dad, I've got to learn this poem. Can you help me with something?" And then Darren looked at him and he was like, I wrote that poem. And then his son was like, no, you didn't. You wouldn't have written that poem. This is like a famous poem by some poet. And he was like, no, I wrote that poem. And his son just wouldn't believe him. But they were teaching it in the curriculum, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's so amazing.
So I was like, if he doesn't get an A, that will be terrible.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to have to take his dad in for show and tell at this point.
I know. And I imagine him going to his teacher and saying, I think the poem's about this. And the teacher saying, no, I don't think it is. But Darren's
you're
like,
interpreting.
I wrote it. Yeah. So yeah, those were two great projects from that time that kind of stand out, but there were loads.
It sounds like those pieces of work really were, I guess, like steeped in purpose. Like even with the alternative rich list, you're not the biggest fan of the rich list, but like how can it be more meaningful and like be more purposeful for you? Was that always something that you found, I guess, was more enriching, like in the work that you were doing, if it had more purpose and just was a bit deeper?
Yeah, I think I've always just wanted to use my creative skills to make the world better. So I'm always drawn to work and clients and campaigns that is doing something positive, basically. So yeah, it's kind of rooted in what we do, and even now as House of Oddities, which I know we'll talk about later, we seem to attract the clients who I love working with, which is amazing. And I would say 90% of them are purpose and impact driven.
So looking back over the beginning of your career, I guess both at News UK or Bridge Studio and then your time at Sunday Times, how do you feel about the diversity of the industry at that time when you were starting out, both I guess the editorial and commercial sides of art direction and design?
I think at that time it was awful. I still don't think it's great. I still think we've got a really long way to go. I think that, we had started making a bit of progress. But then Trump came in and all the big corps got scared and then backtracked on any positive steps that they had taken and cancelled all their DEI initiatives and fired all their inclusion officers or whatever. So I feel like it started off terribly, like when I started my career. It got a little bit, I wouldn't say it was ever amazing. I think it got a bit better, but there was still a huge lack of senior leadership from diverse backgrounds. It was more that a lot of people were bringing in like junior kind of apprentices and things, which is also great, but it's really hard when you're bringing apprentices and kind of interns if they've got no one to aspire to be or no one that looks like them at the top. So I think there was always still a lack of that. Like just the fact that today in 2025, I am one of the 0.01% of women of colour that own a creative agency shows how we haven't really come very far. Do you know what I mean? Like that can't be a real stat, but it is a real stat. And I think, now, post Trump, I think it's like we've just gone back to the Stone Ages again. So I don't really know like how that's going to change or how that's going to be fixed. But I think unless big corporations, stand their ground and mean what they say and believe in what they believe and actually do it, then that's different. But I think there's just too much fig leafing that happens. Like a lot of companies will do things because from a PR perspective it makes them look good, but they don't actually care about it enough, which is why they've all cancelled it. And the amount of people I know that were like head of diversity or inclusion officers, they've all just lost their jobs because they're like, yep, we're taking that budget out now, we don't need that. DEI's cancelled now, it's dead. It's not DEI, it's DIE. You're like, what? So yeah, it's awful. Like it's really awful. And I think I'm a tiny small agency, but obviously we do what we can. But unless everybody's on the same page and everybody's wanting to do it, there isn't going to be a massive change.
And I know that this has always been something quite like central to a lot of the work that you've been doing. So even before House of Oddities, I know you founded Studio Pi.
Yes.
An artist agency and that promoted equality and celebrated diversity. How did that idea come about? I guess to be working with a diverse range of artists and really like celebrating equality between them.
Yeah, so I think at that point in my career, I'd been commissioning artists for about 15 years and I felt like I'd fallen into the same trap as lots of my other commissioner friends where, like you're doing loads of work, timelines are tight, budgets are tight, everything's like happening you're spinning lots of plates. And as a result, you just like, it's not intentional, but by default, you end up going to like the same artist agencies in the same places because you know the people, you trust the people, you've used them like 30 times before. And as a result, what I found was like the work was getting more and more stagnant because we'd all be using the same photographers and we'd all be using the same illustrators and we'd all be using the same animators, whatever it was. Like there were certain agencies that existed that are amazing agencies, don't get me wrong, they've all got fantastic reputations and they have good rosters. But if all of the agencies are using all of the creative agencies are using the same, the same artist agencies, then the work's never going to change. And I just felt like I needed to take a step back because there's so much talent out there, but not all of them are repped by agencies, right? And no one will ever know these people exist unless they are repped. So, and it was things like, I did a lot of work with car clients and I couldn't think of, I still can't today actually, but I can't think of one single black car photographer. I can't. And it's because to shoot cars, it's quite an inaccessible space and field. And there might be a black car photographer that exists out there, but I just couldn't think of one. At that time, now it's a little bit different, but at that time I couldn't think of a female CGI artist. Like there were loads of things that were just missing. So I wanted to set up Studio Pi as an artist agency that specifically represented the unrepresented. So it was kind of like seeing the unseen. And it was something that I wanted to do independently. But at the time, I couldn't financially make it happen. So because I was creative director at Bridge Studio at News UK at that time, I pitched it to them as an idea and they basically invested in it. So they made it happen.
That's nice. So they were, I guess they bought into your idea and what you were wanting to do, and it just meant that you were going to have a wider range, a wider pool of creators that you were going to be able to work with.
Exactly, because I really wanted to do it independently, but I just couldn't financially make it happen at the time. And because I was there, I thought, let me just pitch it to them as an idea, see what they think. They bought into it and invested in it. So so it happened, and it was an amazing process. To be fair, like when I was selecting that roster, we did like a blind judging thing where I got, I think maybe about 20 different senior people from across the industry, from creative agencies, design agencies, editorial spaces, whatever it was, to blind judge like the kind of talent that we'd found. And I think the original list we had was about 60, and we were trying to narrow it down to our final roster of 20. And I remember during that process, like a lot of these super senior commissioners from amazing places were like, oh my God, because I'd taken all the names and bios away because I didn't want it to be biased. And they were like, tell me who this person is, they're amazing, I want to commission them immediately, right? And they, they'd never heard of them. And that was the point of Studio Pi. The point was to put amazing talent that people don't know exist in front of them so they can get the work.
Yeah, so then there was, I guess they were being judged just on the merit of what they were producing, not because they were from somewhere that was really familiar in terms of like who they were working with.
A lot of the kind of famous talent, had became famous because they're either from wealthy backgrounds, or they've had the right opportunities, or they know the right people. And you can be really talented, but you might not know the right people, you might not come from money, all of those things. It doesn't take the talent away. So it was just trying to shine a light on those people. And also, I guess like it's hard when you're at a creative agency and you're working with clients who are spending a lot of money. You want to have the faith that the photographer or the artist that you're choosing can actually deliver from a client's perspective. And with our roster, like we had quite a mixture of kind of experienced and non-experienced talent, but the beauty was because me and my team had been in the industry for so long, we were able to train the talent and make them client friendly as well. And that obviously really helped, because then everybody that knows us from a client perspective would be like, okay, you guys are looking after it, the talent are there, they're going to be able to deliver. And I think that's the main thing, knowing that they can deliver what the client is asking for.
And I guess, why do you think that it's really important that underrepresented people are really able to carve out a place for themselves within the creative sector?
I think it's important for so many reasons. I mean, we'll talk a bit more about this later, I'm sure, but I think for me, I have always felt like I'm kind of hitting a brick wall, and I felt like I'll take 2 steps forward from like a diversity perspective and then 200 steps back. And I had a coffee with a friend a couple of years ago, and he sort of said to me, and I was coming from quite a place of exhaustion, of just being like, you're like fighting for all this kind of change in the industry, and then nothing happens. You're just like exhausted by it. And he was just like, why are we fighting so hard to get a seat at their table when we can just create one of our own? And it was this weird light bulb moment where I was like, God, you've got a point. Like, why am I fighting so hard to get a seat at their table? And that's when you say like carve out a place for themselves, like I do think like there's so many of us that are trying to fit into this existing mold. And I got to a point where I was like, why are we doing that? Like, why don't we just create our own mold? Do you know what I mean? And it's so weird because like I've got so many friends at the moment from Africa or Asia or the Caribbean who are like so bored of England and the UK at the moment, and they're just all moving back. They're all moving back home because there's so much untapped talent and wealth across Asia, across Africa, the African continent, especially across the Caribbean. And they're like, why are we like just doing all this stuff here and just not getting any kind of recognition, or kind of like just anything from the UK? So loads of people, friends I have, are just moving to different countries, and countries that their parents are from specifically, because they've just got so much to give, right? But they're not always getting it here. So I think carving out our own spaces, and I think there's a lot of space, and things like Lydia Amoa, who created the Black Pound report, showing like how much the disposable income is of black people within the UK, and how much advertisers are missing out on all of this wealth because they're not targeting them in the right ways. I just feel like we should all be creating our own tables, and we shouldn't try and join a table that exists if they don't want us there, is my take on it.
And what would you say were like the biggest lessons that you really took away from creating Studio Pi? So like, what were, I guess, like what you gave a huge gift to Bridge Studio at that time, but like what were some of the biggest lessons you took away?
So I won't go into too much detail, but the biggest lesson that I take away is that if you get someone else to invest in your vision and something that you really care about and believe in, then make sure that their values truly align with yours. If they don't, it's never going to work, basically.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for brands and agencies when it comes to, I guess, working with a diverse range of artists, I think maybe the first step is even having the foresight that that's something that they need to be doing. But like beyond that, like how do they get started in making sure that that's something that they can uphold?
I do actually. I've got a good story for this one, but I'd say the most important thing is to let them be themselves. So when I had Studio Pi, I had an amazing. I had a white middle class photography director tell me that he was looking for a black Muslim specifically photographer, and he wanted the black Muslim photographer to shoot this black Muslim talent. And by like pure coincidence, the photographer grew up in the same estate as the talent as well, but that was just by chance, right? So there was already this kind of connection there. And the shoot was happening around this estate as well, right? So it was all the kind of same community and that sort of thing. So I was like, that's amazing, this is great. But then what happened was the said white middle class photography director was messaging the photographer like a brief, and the brief was like, these are previous examples of what has been done for this particular thing we're asking, and basically follow these guidelines on how to shoot. But every single example that he'd sent him was shot by a white male photographer. And basically the photographer rang me and was just like, look, I've seen these images and it's just not really I do something like this. And I said, look, I said, having worked in this industry for ages, what I'd suggest is tick the box and do what he's asked, but save some time in the shoot at the end and then go crazy and do what you would want to do, just because you really needed this job and the money. And I said, do what you've been asked, fine, right? Even if you don't agree with it, just do it. But then spend the time doing, and then let's see all the images together. And obviously we'll try and sell in the ones that you believe in. And what was really interesting was he took this beautiful image. So it was basically, it was the talent and their mum were being photographed, and it was kind of like it was about mother and son relationship type things, right? And this is a black Muslim mother and a black Muslim son, and that it was about things that they do together, basically. So there was a photo of them sitting on a bench outside this estate that they grew up in, and in this photo the photographer had captured them kind of holding hands and closing their eyes in silent prayer, because that's something that they did together, right? And it was this beautiful image, and I really pushed for it. It was the photographer's favorite image, it was my favorite image. I pushed it to the photography director, this is the best image. And the photography director said, oh no, you can't have people with their eyes closed in a magazine. That's not a thing. And I was like, what do you mean it's not a thing? Like, you're asking a black Muslim photographer to take the most authentic, genuine picture of this talent doing what they love the most. This is what they love the most. But it's because there's these institutionalized rules of what you can and can't do with imagery, which aren't true. Like, you can have an image of anything you like, right? But that, in his mind, he's like, you can't have a picture of someone with their eyes closed. That's not a thing, right? They have to have their eyes open looking to camera. And they didn't run that picture. They run some other picture that they like. That was basically him taking the picture, but it was art directed from a white vision. So my point is, if you want to work with a diverse range of talent and artists, let them be themselves. Like, you're bringing them on for their perspective. You're bringing them on for their vision. If you're going to dictate how they should do something, then hire another person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're just giving them the camera, but you're the
Giving
one
them the
that's
camera and
got
you're
all the
using their
control. You need to
name.
give over the
Yeah,
control as well.
you're using their name to tick a box to say, hey, I hired a black Muslim photographer, look at me, I'm so diverse. But you're
Yeah.
not actually letting them shoot with the authenticity that they want to shoot with, and that just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
So now moving on to talk about your latest venture. So you are the co-founder of House of Oddities. Can you tell us a bit about House of Oddities and how the whole idea came about?
Yeah, so I spent the best part of 2 decades working for large corporations, as we discussed, and whilst I learned a lot, there were also many things that frustrated me. I've always wanted to use my creative skills for good and to make our world better. And I've always fought for what I believe in and tried to create positive, meaningful, and impactful change wherever I've worked, really. But I also, like, as we said before, like, I always felt like I would take 2 steps forward and then 200 steps back, right? There's a lot of red tape and layers of bureaucracy when you work in a big organisation, and that can often stifle creativity. And again, I think we mentioned this before, but there's a lot of fig leafing that happens to kind of show the external world that you're doing something really positive when internally you're probably doing the opposite. And I think when I was junior, I was really naive to a lot of the negative things that are in our industry. And I think because when you are in junior positions, you're kind of shielded and protected from a lot of the stuff that's happening up top, right? But I felt like the more senior that I got, the closer I got to the politics and the toxicity and the burnout, and it was just
Yeah, you kind of
yeah,
seeing behind the curtain, you know?
absolutely, yeah. Because like I'd work in these spaces, and I was just so naive to so many things because I was just so excited to be there, and I was so happy to be there, and I love my job, and that's all great. But I do think like everyone aspires to be senior, and I did, but when I got there, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Because then suddenly you're exposed to all the realities of stuff, right? And you're like, God, it's not as glamorous as I thought it was. And I think like I've never been one to follow the status quo. And House of Oddities is an agency that is basically anti everything that I just mentioned. And I wanted to build a home for all of the misfits and the weirdos that don't feel like they fit into that kind of like traditional agency life, I guess. I've worked in a lot of places and spaces that were run through a culture of fear. And I wanted to prove that, I feel like I'm always trying to prove something, but I wanted to prove that like you can be nice and you can also make great work and you can also have fun at the same time. And those three things can happen at once, that you don't have to pick one. Do you know what I mean? To sacrifice another. And I mean, like running a business is hard, don't get me wrong, but that part isn't rocket science. Like it always confused me when people would run teams through a culture of fear, because I find that if your team like you and you have fun together, then they really they care about the work and they want to go above and beyond because they genuinely do love it, and they're coming at it from a place where they're excited to be a part of it. Whereas when you run teams through a culture of fear, like your team is scared and they might stay late to finish the work, but like, do they want to? No. Are they putting their heart and soul into it? Are they giving it their best? Probably not, right? So it's that hard thing. And I think we, House of Oddities, won gold at the Campaign Agency of the Year Awards in March. And for a new agency like ours, like it really proves that it's working, and clients also seem to like it. Like we have the privilege of working on some really incredible accounts. Like last year we won the very important Sport England This Girl Can account, and some of our activations for that are going to go live in September, which we're really excited about. So watch out for those. But yeah, we're also working with Tony's Chocolonely, Button Up Box, at also some charities like NSPCC, Oxfam, Amnesty International, and more. So I think, being nice goes a long way.
Did you always have an idea about like the type of work you wanted to produce for House of Oddities, like be that TVCs or like it sounds like you're doing some activations? Like, did you know what type of work you wanted to produce, or was it more about what clients you wanted to work for and like the meaning behind the campaigns?
I think for us, the idea is the most important thing. I think if we get a brief and we know what the client wants to achieve, ideas should always be platform agnostic. So I think the idea is the most important thing, and that can be executed in many different ways depending on who we're trying to reach, where we're trying to reach them, and why. And I think my background in Bridge Studio was really helpful because we always worked on 360 campaigns, so everything we did was multifaceted. So I'd never want to say to a client like, this idea can only work on TV. Like, I think that's mad, right? Because a good idea should be able to work anywhere, right? You can tweak that idea so it's a PR activation. You can tweak it so it's a digital video. You can tweak it so it's like, if it's a good idea, it should be platform agnostic. Is the way I see it.
Yeah, I always say like there's a saying, isn't there? Like there's like multiple ways that you can like skin a cat. Like you have that good idea, and then there's all that good story. You can
Yes,
tell it in it like
exactly
through a
that. Yeah,
multitude of different
and
like media.
the idea is way more important than the platform to me. Like if you've got a strong enough idea, you should be able to execute across all different platforms.
And so, what do you enjoy most about your work, and I guess the home that you've made for yourself at House of Oddities?
So yeah, House of Oddities was built on the purpose that difference makes a difference. And I have worked in a lot of places that have predominantly been filled with white, middle class, private school educated men. And I think when you have a high proportion of people that come from a similar background, it can get boring. And I think, you know, like 100% of our team come from at least one of the most underrepresented groups in the UK's creative sector. And because of that, they bring fresh perspectives, they bring wilder ideas, they bring more interesting conversations, and they bring a creative that has a wider reach and makes a bigger impact on our society, because not everybody's thinking the same. Like, it's not like a homogenous environment. And I think we also have an unusual USP, in that despite being a creative agency, none of our senior team have ever worked a single day in traditional ad land, right? Which lots of people find weird. We all come from editorial.
Yeah, it's weird.
So we're a creative agency, but we've never worked in traditional ad land. And we all come from editorial. And that means that we're all really good at storytelling, and we all are really good at understanding audiences. And it's not always what they want to hear, but it's what they need to hear, right? And I think that's a really important part of what House of Oddities is about. And it's at the heart of everything that we do. And the other bonus of coming from an editorial background and not coming from traditional ad land is that it really makes us question the way that people do things in traditional creative agencies and why they do them that way. Like, I remember I was bringing on a really great experienced executive producer onto a TVC shoot, and she'd been in the industry for about 25 years, and I think she'd worked on like 300 plus TVCs. And she'd do something and I'd say, like, why are you doing it like that? What if we did it like this, or like this, or like this? And then she'd be like, oh no, well, you can't do that, because like this is the way. And I just find it really bizarre that like people are so institutionalized into doing something a certain way, where they just can't see past it and they don't challenge it, and they just kind of step and repeat through their career and do everything the same constantly. And I think that's probably why 87% of advertising is ignored, because everybody's doing stuff in this way. And because we don't come from that background, we're like, well, we're gonna do it like this, you know. It's completely not the way we would expect, but it still works and it still gets the results, I guess. And in answer to your question of what I enjoy the most, I would say what I enjoy the most is definitely the freedom. So I'd say like the freedom to make my own decisions, the freedom to say no to clients whose value don't align with ours, the freedom to just be myself and not have large corporate comms teams filter or censor every word that comes out of my mouth. And I think, yeah, I mean, I have freedom tattooed on my wrist in Sinhalese, but it's basically the most important thing about starting this agency was having that freedom.
It's nice as well. When you were talking, I was thinking back to the story you were telling about the photo that wasn't able to be printed of the mother and son, and it's almost that same concept that when you are following certain rules, these unwritten rules to a T, well, then you're just going to be producing like the same old thing.
Exactly.
So by you not having that whole history of like being in part of that old ad land and that being in your head, and that putting a rule book of what you can
there's no rule book,
and opens up the possibilities.
Yeah, and that's the thing, at House of Oddities there is no rule book. You know, you do what you want to get the best results, however that may come about.
Yeah, and I think so many people know that when it comes to editorial, like, it is viewed in a different way than commercial, and so, but you're creating commercial, but with that editorial background, so you're trying to produce things that people are going to want to engage with, that people are going to want to read and see and be involved in.
Totally, yeah. And I do think like it works and it makes a difference.
So recently you won the £2 million Sky Zero Footprint Fund with your client Tony's Chocolonely. How has that experience been for you so far?
That has been amazing. So that's just new news that happened, but that's it's been fantastic. I can't remember how many brands entered that we were up against, but I know it was a lot. And it was an intense pitch process. We didn't attend the pitch, the Tony's client attended the pitch, but from what I heard, it was very like Dragon's Den style.
Yeah.
They had some amazing judges there, and yeah, it was fantastic. Like, one of the judges messaged the other day to say that, you know, our concept was like the greatest basically among all of them, which was like really nice to hear. And it's just really exciting for Tony's because they've never been on TV before. So I think as a fund and an initiative from Sky, it's a really brilliant one, like to help purpose-driven brands get on TV and to gift that media space is like really important. And I don't know how much people know about Tony's, but they're not just chocolate, they're obviously on a mission to pay cocoa farmers more fairly in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, and that's why their chocolate is priced slightly higher. And I think a lot of people are like, oh no, it's £3.50 for a bar from Waitrose, but the whole point is it's £3.50 for a bar because the farmers are getting paid fairly and they're not using child slaves to make the chocolate, right? So for me, I'm like, I'm happy to spend £3.50 on a bar because that means like I'm helping stop exploitation in the cocoa farming industry. So to be a part of making this ad and, you know, having their first time on TV and hopefully getting a new audience via Sky and getting more people to buy their chocolate, which will effectively help again stop exploitation and deforestation and, you know, everything like that. I think it's a really exciting one for us.
So I know that Tony's Chocolonely has been a client of yours for quite a while now. I think that you were, I can't remember if it was on your LinkedIn or it was an ad that you'd done for them, but I'd always been calling them by the wrong name, which I think it was actually quite good to see that ad because I was like, oh, it's not just me though, because
Not just you, yeah. I
yeah,
think everybody had called them Tony's
Choc-
Chocolonely. Yeah,
Chocolonely, yeah,
but it's actually lonely. We did do a whole campaign about it, which is a
yes,
funny one. But it's because when the guy that set up Tony's, he felt like, so he's actually an ex-journalist too, which is amazing. And he felt like he was the only person in the industry trying to make a change, and he felt lonely. And that's like
yeah,
lonely, yeah. And I think lots of people just say chocolonely because it rolls off the tongue a bit easier.
yeah, it does. But
Actually,
it's
lonely.
Chocolonely, which we all know now, thanks to you.
Yes.
So thinking about the, I guess the ad industry, the creative industry on a more broader sense, what do you think are the biggest challenges that the sector is facing right now?
I think inevitably it's the rollout and continuing development of AI, right? But I think my take on it seems to be a little bit different to everyone else, maybe. I think like there are obviously legitimate fears that it will lead to job losses and change the way creative is done, and that's fair because obviously the way things are done changes every 5 minutes, right? We're a long way out from the old Caxton printing press days, you know, with movable type and all of that. But digital cameras came and changed the game, like Adobe Creative Suite came and changed the game, and so did smartphones and tablets and social media and everything else. And I think we've always adapted, and we will again. And I think what concerns me about AI is that companies too often forget the value of human difference. At
Yeah,
the moment, yeah, like I think at the moment, the way that big agencies and clients deal with AI is either to pretend it doesn't exist or to use it as a means to cut human cost, which is a bit like firing all of your factory workers and replacing them with Roombas when they came out, right? Like you'll have a really nice clean floor, but not many products to sell. And I think the technology is useless unless you have the right humans deciding what it can do and what to do about the stuff that it can't do. So I feel like no matter what tools we use, our lived experience and our ability to create impossible things comes from like a very human ingenuity. And every business in the world and every product and every innovation has come from that human difference, right? And I think even though the tools might have changed, like I think the first Ford car was designed by hand in clay, whilst the latest was sculpted digitally using VR. Do you know what I mean? But the human element is vital to making sure that that process creates something of value. And some humans are obviously better at it than others, right? Like my mum making a film on an iPhone is very different to Danny Boyle making 28 Days Later on an iPhone. Do you know what I mean, right? So it's the skill
yeah,
of the human that's doing it. And I think as more and more companies embrace AI, everything could end up looking the same, feeling the same, unless we inject that human difference into what we're doing. And because AI is open source and you get clients playing with it, agencies playing with it, everyone's suddenly able to create video and photography and illustration and layouts and code. And we'll end up in an even more homogenized world if we don't make sure that properly skilled creative humans are given the control of these tools to make something worthy of attention, regardless of how it's made. And that doesn't mean the right person has to be in a creative agency, but we should be leading the way, and we do that by reminding clients of the power of human difference.
yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's also the fact that you mentioned earlier that there's like a huge proportion of advertising content that just gets ignored.
Yeah,
So
87% apparently.
Yeah, so how much of this noise, how much of this content is just going to be created and then ignored? So
Exactly.
you've got rid of the humans that can create that
Yeah.
smaller element of like beautiful content that people pay attention to, and we're just going to get more, like a larger amount produced, but more, it's just more to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I do. I think, we use it as a tool, but we still need humans and creatives to make the difference and stand out from the crowd.
Brilliant. And thinking ahead, where do you hope to be a year from now? Where do you hope House of Oddities to be a year from now?
But a year from now, I mean, I hope that I've had a chance to catch up on a lot of sleep. I miss sleep. Sleep was nice. But I mean, like the struggle is real when it comes to running a new business. I think everybody warned me, and I was like, "How hard can it be?" But it turns out it's very, very hard indeed. But other than that, like I'm hoping that once the madness has calmed down, we're really focusing on building up the team at the moment. We're planning to make some more hires in the next 6 months. So in a year's time, I think we'll be making an even bigger impact when it comes to disrupting this industry. We're working on a campaign right now, which even me, who's quite brave, first thought, steady on, that's maybe a bit too batshit crazy, but we're doing it anyway. So you'll definitely know which one I mean when it comes out. But it's all of those moments of bravery and weirdness that come from a team that feels confident they have a voice and a safe space to explore new ideas. So I'm hoping in a year's time it will only be better.
Nice. And just thinking about the sector as a whole, like what if there's one thing that people could do or start thinking about now, like what is your hope for other marketers and other agencies? Like what do people need to be concerned about? What changes do they need to be making?
So this is a bit of a left field answer, but because now I run my own agency and I don't have a corporate comms team filtering me out, for me, like the thing that concerns me the most and how people address it as marketers is like the biggest issue for me right now is the ethnic cleansing and genocide that's happening in Gaza. And I just feel like it's really easy to feel helpless in situations like this and like you're a lone voice in a sea of silence within this industry. But I think as an agency, like we are doing whatever we can do. We are speaking up on our platforms, and a couple of weeks ago, we joined forces with the Red Line for Gaza Coalition, which is a collection of charities including Oxfam and War Child and Choose Love, and more to help pressure the government into taking some actual meaningful action. And I think for me, like a lot of this industry, like especially on LinkedIn, like has been silent, and I just feel like being silent is genuinely being complicit. And I think while so many of the big corporations are silent because they fear Trump and Netanyahu, like House of Oddities will keep pushing for change. And I do urge everyone else in the industry to use their voice and their platform to do the same, because I think, you've got these voices, you've got this platform, we are marketeers, and there's a huge thing that's happening and a lot of people are just ignoring it, and we need to do better. We need to do better, and we need to be better.
Thank you. I really commend you for speaking out and speaking your truth on that. I think it's important that people don't hide away.
Yeah.
And they think of where their moral standpoint is on things, and they, it can be difficult when something is so layered politically, layered religiously, to like take that standpoint, especially when there's a thought that it could have an impact on future work and working with clients. And so that's, I think, not only just people's fear of political fears stop them. I think sometimes it is the economic fears that's actually the barrier,
I mean, I won't get into it too much because I'll end up going on a tangent. But yes, I think the industry needs to do better. Is all I'm saying.
And so I know that you are quite vocal. I love always coming to different talks that you're on, different panels. But where is best for people to keep up with kind of what you have going on? Would it be on LinkedIn?
I think LinkedIn or Instagram is fine. Yeah, probably LinkedIn's the best place.
Perfect. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn on this episode so people can find you online.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you.